Yeah, let's crack on.
All right, cool. Yeah.
What is your best definition of activism? So it can be original or it can be a definition that you've adopted.
I'd say to me, it's in the name, activism. It's about being active in the community that you are supposed to be representing. It's about changing the conditions within that community. You know, whether big steps, whether small incremental changes, but working within the community you're supposedly representing to build political, social, economic, material changes.
Thank you for keeping it very, very succinct, very simple, very accessible.
Yeah.
So to what extent would you say that your life so far has been guided by the very definition of activism, specifically within the context of Pan-Africanism? To what extent has your life been sort of shaped or guided by it, consciously or unconsciously, do you think?
I would say mostly through the studying and learning of previous activists and revolutionaries, the people that have actually embodied what it means to change the Black community, both locally and globally. So that's almost served like an inspiration for me to actually, you know, try and institute some sort of change, utilizing the sort of the lessons of the past, the truest activists, the ones that, you know, stayed true and committed to the crux of activism, and being inspired by that and utilizing what they did to carry out my own personal work. Not that I would necessarily even consider myself an activist. I think that term is bandied about quite loosely.
Yeah,
there's a lot of sort of self-proclaimed Twitter activists who sort of say they're doing a lot of work by doing a lot of tweets, consider themselves activists. I think if you're not sort of implementing change within the community directly, then you shouldn't sort of consider yourself to be. But yeah, I'd say that's sort of the sort of summary, I'd say, with regards to utilizing the spirit of activism in order to further my own work.
For sure. So to your understanding, how important is activism to the nation building agenda of the Black community? I'm sure I'll let you answer, but I've got a strong feeling.
I mean, it's extremely important. It's, I mean, in terms of building towards the ultimate goal of Pan-Africanism, if you are an African person anywhere in the world and you're not, and you're, you know, somewhat aware of the situation that is going on globally, and you're not building towards, you know, at least building towards some sort of organization or trying to at least implement something within your local community that is obviously in tandem with the global Black community, I kind of think, you know, what are you doing? What is the sort of purpose of what you're actually trying to achieve as an individual? I think many of us have sort of internalized the European ideology of individualism, you know, seeing themselves and maybe their immediate family as, you know, attempting to make it in the capitalist system, and somehow if they make it, then, you know, that's all right, as opposed to seeing us as a sort of a community, both locally and globally. So I'd sort of say the activism, even, you know, because there's different levels of activism. Not everyone is going to be, you know, frontline revolutionary. Not everyone's going to be within certain circles. It's, you know, we all have a part to play. So if you are somewhat aware, because I can't really blame you if you're completely ignorant of what's going on, but if you are somewhat aware, which most of us are, you have to sort of be doing something that contributes towards the sort of Pan-African struggle. You know, whether it's, I guess this kind of leads into another question that you're going to ask me later, but, you know, whether it's small things like even just donating to a cause, donating to organizations to keep them afloat so they can keep doing the work, whether it's outright joining an organization, whether it's volunteering your skills towards the helping and betterment of your community. So it's extremely important towards both just the accruing of sort of soft power. So, you know, making incremental changes within local communities that ultimately benefit the Black masses, as well as obviously hard power, which is the end goal of building an African nation that's united. So, I mean, you basically have no other choice if you have any sort of self-respect as an African person. It's a mass collective effort. I think that even in sort of conscious circles, there's this sort of false notion that individuals have made the changes, you know, whether it's Malcolm X or Martin Luther King or Marcus Garvey, as opposed to their actual organizations, their movements, the masses that made the changes. Absolutely. And I think that we buy into this European doctrine of individualism a bit too often. Yeah. And I think if we sort of remove that from our thinking and see that we will have a small part to play, it can make the journey of nation building so much easier. If everyone sort of plays a small part within the sort of activism mandate. Like it doesn't have to be, you know, straight up on the front lines. I think a lot of people, because there's like, on the one hand, there's some people that think activism is basically speaking out and tweeting and stuff. And then there's the other side where people think, to be an activist, you have to be Malcolm X. You have to be
Exactly.
There's you know, everyone has a part to play.
There's a very vast sort of middle ground.
Exactly.
You know, and I think that's where the majority of people actually come in. Mm-hmm. I think it is in those small acts. And like you said, as far as the soft power, it is those things that cumulatively allow us to recognize the collective agency and the autonomy that's required to really stand independently and strong. So no, I'm completely with you there. So why do you think that the word activism, because obviously you've already said, oh, you know, I don't really consider myself an activist, yeah. But why do you think it's received such a bad press?
Oh, that's the white supremacist state doesn't want people to oppose it. You know, full stop, especially African people, the most dominated people globally. I mean, you go through like old FBI documents, you get J. Edgar Hoover saying stuff like the number one mission is to prevent the emergence of a black messiah. You know, you get all of these, you know, COINTELPRO, they're basically primary institution of these things is to stop black activism. I posted something on my story actually a few hours ago of the FBI targeting black bookshops in order to prevent them from releasing black extremist material. So the white supremacist state has done a very good job of demonizing things that are progressive for African people. I mean, even like, to slightly go off on a tangent, not just the notion of black activism, but even African culture today is undergoing the same attack. I mean, if you go on Twitter, go on Instagram, scroll 5 minutes, you'll see all these memes, these, you know, conscious taking the piss memes where it's like a cartoon character wearing African dress and people are laughing at it, and you start thinking, you know, what happens when a sort of young black teenager sees all these memes, laughs at it, and then they go and, you know, someone tries to show them a video of John Henrik Clark or Sheikh Anta Diop, and they look and they think, oh, he's like that. He's like those memes. He must be a fool as well. It's this sort of demonization of the conscious African person and African culture as a whole, and of course, black activism. So it is completely the white supremacist state. And then from that as well, you also get the notion that, because it's sort of two sides, you get the notion that, you know, activists and activism is a joke and a waste of time, and African culture is a joke and a waste of time. Then you also get the white supremacist state propping up activists that you know, they're lactivists, for lack of a better term, who do a lot of talking and tweeting, and people end up following them and donating to them, and they basically help conceal the fact that nothing's ever changing.
You know, that's how I see it. They're simply seeking to preserve the status quo.
Exactly.
So, do you know what it is for me? I always think to myself, well, you know, what is then the best form of counterattack? And a lot of the time, I think because the language of the day is what the masses recognise, you kind of have to adopt similar weaponry. You know, you need to kind of adopt similar approaches, and that's in part, I suppose, why the way that the Black Knowledge Society tries to approach things is almost half in, half out. It sounds a bit odd, but we need to make sure that in terms of the masses that we're trying to attract, because for us, we're not trying to preach to the converted. That is just a complete waste of time.
Exactly.
So somebody said this to me the other day, you catch more flies with honey than you do vinegar.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you need to meet people at their level that they're at. You can't,
yeah. So I suppose, I think there's a lot to be said for the use of language and how we seek to reclaim that language that's being used within this whole attempt to even win people over.
Exactly.
To even engage in activism. Because like you said, the word itself is, if anything, it's considered a negative word. You're considered sort of subversive if you engage in sort of any form of activism. So
exactly.
So no, very, very interesting response there. Thank you. Next question is, what is one simple form of activism that you believe that those who, as you were saying, have a sort of level of consciousness, maybe like an entry level of consciousness? What kind of acts of activism do you think that they can be involved with?
Something that's, if we're being honest, the simplest thing a person can do is some form of donation. So whether it's donating money to a Pan-African organization that they see is doing work, so don't just donate to anyone, because if we talk to most Black people, the one organization they're going to know is Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter aren't exactly championing the African cause.
No, exactly.
So obviously you need to sort of, the internet is so sort of vast that on the one hand, you can get quite lost in it, but on the other, it's quite easy to connect and find organizations and people that are doing good works. So once you have found this and it's something that you believe in and it's something that is clearly aiding global African people, either donate your money that you've earned, or you can donate your time if there's something specific that they need.
Yeah.
Maybe they're looking for volunteers to help refurbish a new community center, for example. You can go donate your time to volunteer. You can donate a skill. Say, I don't know, if you're a plumber and they need their community center sort of refurbished, you can go and donate your skills. If you're a painter, if you're, whatever your skill may be that's useful, donate that.
Yeah.
You can, so I'd say, donate your time, donate your money, donate your skills. Those are sort of the most simple things you can do on a sort of organizational level. In terms of sort of, I guess it's not activism, but it's steps towards activism as an individual, is just studying and learning and getting to a stage where you are able to read literature that is going to help your liberation.
For sure.
So it's not just, reading anything. It needs to be things that you need to basically evaluate everything in your life and see how beneficial it is towards your liberation and how detrimental it is to your liberation. And when it comes to reading, you need to be reading things that are very beneficial, and there's plenty of works. Because if we actually think about it, the works that have been produced, the volume of Pan-African scholars and revolutions there have been, theorists, we can go through the whole list. The knowledge that we seek as a people is already there. So we just need to sort of open it up, start studying and start learning and start reading.
100%.
So that would be my sort of advice as an individual. But obviously, of course, particularly with younger people, but people of all ages, you need to sort of build up your reading stamina. So you need to sort of, it's like you go to the gym, you're not going to start benching 100 kg straight away. You need to, build up. So this is why, obviously, our organization exists, our online school exists, which is, short sort of snippets of information that build you up in towards reading, Amos Wilson or Marimba Ani or John Henrik Clark or whatever it may be. But I'd say, those are the two things. So on an organizational level, donating, whether it's time or your skills or your money, and on an individual level, taking steps towards your own activism by reading, studying, learning.
Brilliant. I think, the point that you make about sophomores, if you like, and just coming into this very, very new, I think that is probably one of the most important elements, that they are able to journey at their own pace. And I think what you offer with Boukman is powerful to that end, because I feel that for a very, very long time that Pan-Africanism has kind of had these kind of gatekeepers who determine who is and who is who isn't actually qualified by the sort of grading or standard of their scholarly sort of exploits. And you just think to yourself, that has to change, because that is to undermine the very idea, the very notion of Pan-Africanism in itself.
Yeah, exactly.
You get what I mean? Yeah. So that's wonderful that it's about liberally making the resources, the tools available for people to actually feed, because it's about them feeding and nurturing that interest. Because I think initially it starts with an interest that then has to be nurtured into something a lot stronger. So credit to you guys again for what you're doing in that
Thank you.
In the area, because I think it is an area that has been just sorely neglected. Nobody really thinks about the mainstream. How do we actually win over the mainstream?
Yeah, exactly. You need to make it appealing. If it's not appealing, then people aren't gonna. Doesn't matter who you are, how smart you are. People aren't gonna engage.
With a lot competing for our time and for our attention, and so much distracting us, how do we sustain our commitment to activism, and also how do we sort of discern those who are and those who aren't, especially when you're new, because you're very vulnerable and susceptible to. Do you get what I mean? So it's like, what would some of your advice be to those who are just coming in?
I guess I'll start with the second half. I think it's the duty of those of us who are a lot more experienced and a lot more aware of the game that's played. It's our duty to sort of show the rest of the people the sort of the fake from the real, the white supremacist controlled faces of activism, as opposed to what is really activism. So I'd say it's kind of a duty that rests with us. Although obviously when you've got millions of dollars backing you to be put in a particular position, it's not an easy, fight for those of us that are a lot more conscious and experienced. But I think we have to keep showing people what activism truly is, number one, through our own actions. Yeah. And number two, sort of showing why these people are not for the betterment of the global African people. I think that's the best way of sort of, because like you said, people inexperienced, they're going to gravitate to whoever or whatever has the most followers, whoever has the most visibility. That's with everything. That's not with activism, that's with music, that's with football, that's with
it's trending.
Anything, yeah. Brands and clothing and stuff. So I think it sort of is the duty of those of us that are within the sort of circles already to show the newbies and the inexperienced the actual way towards doing something towards fighting the actual system.
Yeah. How do you as an individual on that journey sustain yourself? Like what has your experience been? How were you able to sustain? What was it that kept you?
Well, I'd say for me personally, I'll start with generally, actually. Generally, I would say for people who are within these circles, who are getting into these circles, don't see yourself as an individual. See yourself as part of a collective, both sort of intergenerationally and concurrently. Connect with like-minded people, whether, within where the area you live or whether through the internet. connect with organizations, and you can almost help each other with the sort of journey towards sustained activism. You know, when you're feeling tired or feeling down or something, and you've got an organization that you then are connected with that are doing great things, it can inspire you to be like, you know what, I need to get involved as well. Whether it's an individual, you can sort of, like two individuals working together, they can sort of split the burden, as it were, helping each other again to sort of prevent themselves from getting too down about something or hitting a brick wall or anything like that. So I'd say making all these connections, stop sort of going it alone. Is kind of advice to myself as well, but stop sort of seeing it as a journey you need to chart alone. Connect with other people, like-minded individuals. You can almost all share the burden and keep building towards the ultimate goal, essentially.
Yeah.
As for me personally, I find a lot of inspiration from reading about other people in the past. And,
give us one example of an individual that you really found inspirational.
I mean, I'd say one of the biggest inspirations. I mean, there's so many to name, but I'd say one of the biggest was Huey Newton, because of his specific journey of being almost looking at his society and seeing things aren't changing quick enough and deciding to be that change and creating an entire organization, world famous, very revolutionary organization that was, you know, for oppressed peoples all across the world. I'd say just studying and reading and being inspired by stories like his, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, and, you know, not seeing these people as, I mean, because they almost are cherished as if they were more than human, like almost as if they were gods.
Yeah, like deified.
Yeah, exactly. Where I think if we almost see them as the humans that they were, it can be even more inspiring.
Powerful.
They achieved so much, and then that can almost get you off your backside to go and continue what you're doing and inspire you to continue doing the work that needs to be done today. Because it's almost like, I feel that once you're aware of that stuff, it's almost your duty to keep fighting and doing something, because these people gave so much for you to be in the position that you're in now, that you have no choice but to continue their fight and honor their legacy. So for me personally, I'd say, yeah, reading and studying the revolutionaries that came before and seeing what they did. And then it's almost like I almost feel sometimes that I have no right to feel any sort of burnout or feel down or anything, because they did so much more with so much less.
So much less, absolutely, 100% with you. Yeah, completely. You know, I feel very much the same way.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a really sober reflection there. Thank you for sharing that. And then the final question, it's not even a question, it's just to complete the statement. And you may have already kind of answered it throughout. But yeah, my activism is inspired by.
Yeah, my activism is inspired by the ancestors, the brothers and sisters of the past, the revolutionaries that gave so much, both the revolutionaries that we know of and did great things that I've mentioned throughout this interview, but also the masses, the ones that will never get their names known. Every soldier in the Haitian Revolutionary Army, for example, or every member of the American Civil Rights Movement that sat on the buses and, you know, stopped taking the buses for an entire year. I mean, I can't even imagine the sort of strength of will to, I mean, if we're thinking about us as a people today, I'm slightly going off on the tangent here, but I mean, we've got people that would struggle to go a day without certain brands or eating at certain restaurants. And they went out an entire year walking 20 miles to work, to and from work, for such an honorable purpose. You know, the members of Malcolm's organization, Afro-American Unity, that did such great works, the 6 million members of Garvey's UNIA, the freedom fighters in Kenya. I mean, there's so many, the actual masses of the people are just as inspirational as the individuals that were leading them. So I'd say those are the the people and the movements and the organizations that inspire me the most.
Lovely. Thank you for that. It is a very emotional sort of reflection, you know, when you do think about it, and, you know, when you put it in such expressive terms as you have, you know, it is a very, very emotional reflection. Do you feel that where we find ourselves now as a society, this is like a bonus question, so this wasn't on there.
Yeah, that's cool.
But where we find ourselves as a society, you know, we do not really find ourselves with our backs against the wall in the same way as times past. And so for that reason, coupled with, you know, the fact that a lot of the reference point for the mainstream of the Black community is to understand our history from the point of slavery, do you think that it's possible to actually stir the inspiration and the will enough within the masses to participate in activism? Because, like you said, the links that people make with activism is, you know, civil rights movement and, you know, the uprisings during slavery. We're nowhere near those places now. And like I said, because people have that as their frame of reference, to all intents and purposes, they see ourselves now as liberated. You know, if we are grading ourselves, if that's our benchmark, then hey, what exactly are we worried about? You know, we can go on lovely holidays, we can get mortgages, we can get credit cards, we can work, we are not affected by Jim Crow or anything of that nature, or any form of apartheid. So what's the problem? You know?
Yeah.
So it's a case of, I suppose what I'm trying to understand is, and it's for you to answer personally, and I suppose based on your knowledge and experience and your own cultural observations, is that, do you think there is enough incentive for the Black community to mobilize?
I think it depends on the frame of reference with regards to the Black community. I think we need to start seeing ourselves as a global people. So too many of us see ourselves attached to a nation.
Exactly.
That is, you know, whether we're in the West and we see ourselves attached to Britain, for example, for some reason, or whether, you know, it's attached to a colonially drawn up nation that didn't exist 150 years ago. We need to start seeing ourselves as a global people. Because once you start seeing yourself as a global people, you understand that you and I and people in this country, in Britain, we are the sprinkles that got out of the sieve, essentially. We are the ones that are just, through sheer luck, happen to be in a slightly better position than the majority of our people. If we start seeing ourselves as a global people and understanding that, we realize that the fight we are sort of carrying out, we are the sort of privileged class, and it is almost our duty to fight for the rest of the masses that are in similar positions than the rest of us were 100, 150 years ago. You know, in Brazil, Black people are killed 5 times the rate as they are in the United States. You know, sometimes it's even higher in certain years. You know, in Africa, there's continuous poverty. Congo, most people, I think 88% live on less than $1 a day. Children are forced to dig in mines. It's literally slave labor that's continued. So if we understand all of these things, we see that us as an individual within the society, we are outliers. You know, we're the lucky ones. And the white supremacist state has been very ingenious, because even though it wants to oppress everyone, it wants to force us all into enslavement, it knows that with that would come a huge backlash, because we'd all know we're tied to the same fate. So it's given these, you know, trinkets. It's elevated certain people into certain positions. It's given just enough freedom, which it does every time there's a a mass pushback. It slightly concedes just enough freedom to appease the masses, which is how we've got into the situation today, where we literally have, I mean, I can't think of any comparable organization to any of the ones of the 50s, 60s, 70s, 20s, 30s, 19th century. The only organization most of us know is one that is controlled by the white supremacist state that is looking to assimilate.
Exactly.
So I think we need to understand, and I think this is the job of the people that are a lot more aware and have the experience. It is our job to, I guess, through almost like Garvey said, propaganda campaigns.
It is. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, indoctrinate the masses into the realization of where they are.
That's what I call. I agree, and I adopt that sentiment from Garvey completely, because it has to be, and this is exactly what I mean by using those same sort of apparatus for our own ends, for our own purposes, because that is the language of the day. That is how society has been conditioned. That is how the encoding, decoding works, So we need to be conversant with those tools, with that machinery, and deploy it to our own advantage, know. But you make a very important point as well, Tyrone, about the relative perspective and position, because I feel as though that is the very tool that keeps us in this malaise, in this complacent state. What happens is we have a very narrow cast view of our relative privilege, and because we're comfortable with that, we can't necessarily identify. We actually otherize ourselves, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's true. Other African people, I mean, you see it again all over social media, these stupid diaspora wars that are always popping off, where people, for some reason, feel more attached to the flag that colonized them and to the nation that destroyed their culture, than to other African people that have had their culture destroyed as well. And people need to also understand sort of the nuance and difference between macro culture, which is the global African culture, and their own individual micro cultures. And so you get stupid shit like, Black American culture is X, Y, and Z. Africans have nothing to do with it and stuff like this. Or you get, Black British culture is this. Why is Caribbean culture trying to get involved, as if they're not exactly interlinked and all from the same birthing place? Like, it's ridiculous. So I think it is definitely our duty to indoctrinate the masses with the truth, and exactly getting them to see that they are a global people and need to start seeing themselves as a global people and not as minorities within particular Western nations that have no affiliation with one another, because the Western nations don't see it that way.
Absolutely, they don't, and they never will. In one of the early questions, you mentioned that people can support by donations and by going on websites and so on and so forth. Like, what do you like when you're sort of looking around? If you look around, like, what are the sort of, do you have like baseline criteria? I don't know. Like, how do you go about, I suppose, sniffing out the sort of good stuff from the bad stuff? And when you look at platforms, I mean, like, what you're saying about let's say the seniors or the elders in Pan-Africanism being having a duty of care to protect those who are up and coming from the wares of all and sundry who are just not for the cause. When you're in your sort of quiet place and you're doing your own thing, how do you sniff them out? Like, what is your approach? Anything that you can offer in that sense would be great.
In terms of organizations, I would say, I mean, most, if not all, organizations are they're somewhat active on social media, and they usually have a website as well. So when you come across an organization, either on social media or on their website, if they don't sort of have a clearly set definition of their purpose and achievements, if they don't set out their aims in a particular clear-cut manner, and if those aims don't actually state exactly how they are going to help the global African community, then it is not an organization I would consider as credible. Like there has to be a concrete set of aims and plans, and the plans. I mean, we're not all going to agree on every single thing. You know, it doesn't have to be the exact same plans for every single Pan-African organization. But if they don't have any set of organizational aims or plans or things that they are doing or will do with support, then, and if they're literally just asking, "Oh, please give us some money," but they don't have any sort of concrete plans, then yeah, forget it. There needs to be plans of action. There needs to be, you know, a blueprint for the material changes they're going to make. Otherwise, this just pointless. It's the Twitter activists again.